Hi guys, and welcome to today's webinar all about what is the Power Platform. So what we're going to be talking about today. So actually, I've got a special guest with me today. I've got my colleague Danny Whale, who's also going to be speaking. We're going to be kicking off. I'm going to talk a little bit about what is the Power Platform at a high level, and then we're going to go into a little bit more detail for each of the areas of the Power Platform, including Canvas Power Apps, model-driven Power Apps, as well as Power Automate. I'll be then handing over to my colleague Danny, who's going to be talking to you about Power Apps Pages, which is formerly Power Apps Portals, as well as Power Apps Virtual Agents and Power BI. There is going to be some time for Q&A at the end. You'll notice that there is actually a Q&A function in terms of at the very top of this webinar. You'll see that there's a Q&A button. Please feel free to drop your questions in there. And at the end, we're going to go through and we're going to pick out some of the top questions to answer. So if you've got any questions, use a Q&A function across the top of the webinar. So first off, what is Power Platform? So the Power Platform is a suite of business applications and services developed by Microsoft that allows users to analyze data, build apps, automate processes, and create virtual agents. So Power Platform isn't just one thing, it's a suite, it's a collection of products. So the first product is PowerApps. So there's different types of PowerApps, but essentially they're all a low-code app development platform for easily creating business applications. So you've got things like Canvas Power Apps, which I'm going to go on talking about shortly, as well as model-driven Power Apps, and we've also got Pages, which was previously the Power Apps Portals. So all of these are for creating applications as part of your overall solution. It's the interface, it's the main kind of app where you're kind of putting in and data entry. Then you've got Power Automate. So Power Automate is an automation platform for automating end-to-end workflows. So this is kind of like the engine which is actually going to be doing things like sending out notifications or alerts, building out approval processes, or doing anything which is essentially part of a business process to push something forward and automate things. You've also got Power Virtual Agents, which is a platform for creating and managing conversational AI agents. And what that basically means is like chatbots. So building out chatbots, and you can be very specific with them, and you can get them to pull out kind of databases, knowledge bases of information. So you could build a chatbot for answering questions, FAQs, things like that. We've also got Power BI as part of the Power Platform. And basically, once you've built out your solutions with things like Power Apps as a way of data entry and Power Automate with automating that, or even Power Virtual Agents as a way of inputting information, you can then use Power BI to actually give analysis on that. So Power BI is a suite of business intelligence tools to analyze data and create interactive visualizations. And that doesn't have to just be data that's been collected by the Power Platform and stored in what we call Dataverse, which is the background database. It could be data that's stored in all sorts of different places. I know Dan's going to be speaking about some examples and give you a little demonstration of that shortly as well. So the first thing then, what are Canvas Power Apps? So under that kind of umbrella of Power Apps, one of the three kind of core Power Apps is known as a Canvas Power App. So the Canvas Power App is part of the Power Platform and has a visual canvas to help you design and build apps. Known as Canvas apps, these provide you a simplistic environment to create what you need. Rather than using complicated code or programming tools, you have an easy drag and drop interface programmed with Excel-like formulas. So essentially what you do is you start off with a completely white blank slate or what they know as canvases. And basically what you see is this screenshot here is a little example I'm going to show you in a second, which is our leave request Canvas Power App. But essentially, you start off with a completely blank white canvas, and then you build up this interface with buttons, with icons, with text, and then you can pull out data from loads of different locations to then interact with this on a mobile friendly kind of app essentially. So you can get the app on your mobile phones, tablets, but you can use them on desktop computers as well. So I'm just going to quickly jump in and show you a couple of examples of Canvas Power Apps. So the first one I've got here is a guided FAQ essentially. So the way I like to kind of think about this is kind of like those books you used to get when you were a kid where you could kind of choose your own ending, where it's kind of saying like, okay, well, if you want ending X, then go to page 5 or something like that. And this is a little bit how the guided FAQ works, where you can come into this, and this is actually a proof of concept for a client that wanted to have a guided pathway for their employees to find out about copyright law. So it was important for them before they used any materials to check whether or not they were going to infringe on any copyright laws. So as an end user, you'd come into here and you click on the start button, and then it would ask you a series of questions which would guide you through to get you your answer. So it could say how to reuse content from scientific publications. Is it a self-help guide? Is it e-learning? So you'd select self-help guide. Then it would say, okay, I need to reuse scientific articles. Whether it's internal or external use, you might say, well, it's external. Then it's going to guide you to another question based on that. Say, why are you reusing the article? So the article has been requested. The article will be used for promotional purposes. So I say for promotional purposes. Is it possible to use a link to the article instead? We say no, and then there we go. Big red flag. Stop. It's telling us that it's unlikely that the licenses will cover you for the use of this. So we've got to an answer using this Canvas app to navigate us through this. So we've built out all of this, and the way that Canvas Apps is kind of built is a little bit like a PowerPoint deck, essentially. These are all kind of slides, almost pages that we've moved through. So it's actually very little formulas that are required to actually make this work. It's purely just based on click of button, go to a different page, click this button, go to this page. So it's very simplistic to put this together. However, it saved them loads of time internally having to answer the same questions when someone has a copyright question, rather than putting in an email and someone physically having to go backwards and forwards asking these same questions. They can do this now all from a nice simple app they can access on their tablets, on their mobile phones, or their computers as well. So that's just one example of what you could do with a Canvas Power App. Another Canvas Power App is our leave request app. So we've built out a leave request that we use internally, and we also sell to our clients. And basically what this is a Canvas Power App which will manage not only holiday requests, but any other types of leave request. And you can see here, this is the first page that will open up when I open up my Canvas app. And I can see what holiday entitlements I'm allowed, what holidays I've taken so far, what holidays I've got left, who my leave approver is, and some other generic information. I can create a new request by clicking on the Create Request button on the left-hand side. And within here, I can select different categories, so holiday, sickness, study leave, different things like that. By selecting on this, I can see what entitlements I've currently got and what, say, for example, if I was to choose to say, okay, well, I'm going to take next Wednesday off, and it's going to be a full day, or I could pick a half day, I'm just going to take the morning, is automatically calculating what my entitlement would be if I was to get this approved. You can have features, things like, are you booking on behalf of another user? So this could be if you're sort of doing it on behalf, if you're a line manager and booking on behalf of somebody else. But essentially then once all this data is then collected, we click on submit, and the app itself, the Canvas Power App, is then submitting the data into a database in the background. Now the database could be Dataverse, which is the Power Platform database. It could be SQL. It could be a SharePoint list. In this case, we're using a SharePoint list, but it's nice and easy to use. We're not storing a lot of data, and SharePoint lists are free to use to store data within them. Then once I submit, we actually kick in a Power Automate workflow, which is then going to submit this to my line manager for approval. Once it's then approved, it will then deduct the balances and issue me a calendar and my line manager a calendar invitation when I've booked that leave off. Calendar apps will also show sort of what we call galleries, which is essentially data that's pulled through. So again, we're using this from a SharePoint list. So this is showing me all the previous kind of holidays and things like that I've booked off. I could use it. We've got this feature for requesting toil, so time off in lieu, as well as a managed area where I can go through and see all the people that I manage and their holiday entitlement. We can also see company holidays. So again, we've got this configured that we've got a SharePoint list which says all our company holidays, and we pull them through into the app. So people know what holidays that they've already got off, and they don't need to sort of double book over them. And then the final Canvas app that I'm showing you, the first two were actually in a kind of landscape mode. So they're much better to be used on a desktop or a tablet, whereas this is in portrait mode. So this is our expense request app. Again, really simplistic and easy to use. the way it works is we create our expense report. So we click on the plus button across the top. We then specify a date. So when this is, so maybe this is going to be my February expenses. So start date is the beginning of Feb, the end date is the end of Feb. The expenses summary. So I might say this is my Feb expenses. I can see who my approver is going to be as well in here. And then I click on create. Now it's really easy then for me to add in new line items. And maybe this is a coffee, for example. When I'm traveling, I'm going to assign it to my consultancy department. Category is food and beverage, maybe it's £3, and then I can choose to add an attachment, which if I'm on my desktop, it would actually open up File Explorer, so I can pick something from my File Explorer to upload. So let me just find a test file within here. Whereas if I actually open this up on my mobile device, if it was on a tablet or if it was on a phone, it would actually allow me also to upload a picture. So I could take a picture or a receipt or an invoice or something like that, and I could then submit that through here as well. So you can see now, here's my line items. I can add multiple line items into here. It'll also track things like mileage. If I want to put mileage, it's got a mileage calculator put in. And then once I'm done with this, I click on submit, and that'll then submit this to my line manager for approval. Once it's then approved, and all this approval again is being done with Power Automate as the engine in the background for the workflows. Once it's then approved, it will then go to our finance team with all that information to say that this expense needs to be processed and for it to be paid to me. So that's Canvas PowerApps. So again, just to summarize on that, they're simple, low-code applications that you build completely from scratch. So there is no set kind of user interface or anything like that. Imagine you were building an app out of PowerPoint and you just got those blank white pages and then you're building things on top of it. So the pros of that approach is that you can completely build it, customize it exactly how you want it to be. The downsides is you do literally have to build it almost from scratch, so it takes a little bit longer. Also, we're going to talk about model-driven apps in a moment, but when we think about Canvas Power Apps, they're more kind of prone to sort of bugs and things like that because, as I say, you're building everything from the ground up, so you're more likely to make a human error. Whereas with a model-driven app, the user interfaces are pretty much pre-built for you, so you're less likely to run into kind of bug-type issues. So on that note, let's talk a little bit about what are model-driven Power Apps. So model-driven apps start with your data model, building up from the shape of your core business data and processes in a common data service to model forms, views, and other components. Model-driven apps quickly generate great UI that is responsive across all devices. So model-driven apps, as we can see here on this little screenshot, they start off by the reason why they're called model-driven apps is because they are based on the model of the data. So actually 99% of the time of building out a model-driven app, you're actually looking at setting up your tables, the relationships between tables, and you're building out the data model is mostly what you're doing when you're building out these kind of solutions. Then the interface comes together very quickly afterwards. All model-driven apps pretty much look and feel the same. There's not a lot of control over the user interface because all of the components of them, like where we can see these graphs and things like that here and these roll-ups, they are pre-built essentially, and your data is just kind of loaded into them. So the pros and cons of that are obviously it's very quick, very simple to put the user interface together. As I say, most of the effort and the time goes into making sure that the data model is right. However, the downside is that say making it look and feel like your own kind of solution or your own brand identity is very difficult with model-driven apps because you don't have really much control over the overall kind of user interface of a model-driven app. So let's take a little look at an example of some model-driven apps then. So a quick example of a model-driven app here is like a contract management system. So again, this is just a proof of concept in our sandbox that we're putting together for a client. But essentially what they want is they will have contracts which are stored inside of this table, essentially, and we can see client names and things like that in here. We can see the contract name, number, who the administrator would be, and for them, they've got like insurance brokers which are assigned to each one of these contracts. Each contract then, when you go into it, has got its own unique fields. So we can put in information which is specific to the types of contract. So it might be, say, account information, so contact information, a bit of a timeline about what's happened with this particular contract, address related to the company, as well as primary contacts, which is again is a relationship-driven type of a scenario where the contact is actually its own record, which is then pulled through onto onto the actual contract record itself. We can have tabs. So within here, we can have tabs of data. So these are essentially forms. We can have roll-ups as well. So maybe these are child accounts which relate to this particular account. So we can have a sort of a parent-child relationship between the two. And it's really simple and easy to use because this is the contracts table. It already has this kind of view built into it. We can add and remove these columns of this table really easily with these buttons across the top. We've got like a new form, so we can go to submit a new form in here, so we can create a new item. You can also see across the top, this is what we call a business process flow, which means that we can manage stages and gateways inside of a model-driven app form. So we can define what these stages are, but for our clients, it was, for example, it was a new contract, it was pending AI because they were using some AI, which was looking over the contract and extracting certain information. Then it'd be the status for ready for review for the broker to actually go in and take a look over the contract, and then it was in progress where the broker is then working with the client, and then it's complete once the job has actually been completed. So these different stages, things can be automated based on them. We can also do things like making sure that certain fields have to be populated at each one of these stages and each one of these gateways, which in itself is a massive value, massive help to organizations to make sure that the right information is captured at the right time. So those are all the kind of key benefits essentially of using a model-driven app. And as I say, model-driven apps, there's pros and cons to them. The model-driven apps are quite simplistic. So in itself, that's a pro and a con, that it's really quick, simple to put together user interface. A lot of it is built very quickly for you. The downside is you don't have a lot of control over the overall user interface. So pretty much every model-driven app tends to look very similar in terms of the way it's laid out, its colors and user interface is very, very similar. So lastly, what I want to talk to you about is Power Automate. So what is Power Automate? So you can easily create automated workflows with Microsoft Power Automate. Previously, it was known as Microsoft Flow, and a lot of people still refer to it as Microsoft Flow or workflows and shorten that down to flows for making it easier to talk about. Essentially, through a simple drag and drop interface, though, we can integrate Office 365 and third-party connectors to improve productivity with business process automation. So you can see here what a Power Automate looks like. Essentially, it has a sort of start, a middle, and an end. It always starts at the very top and works its way down. And there's a few kind of key areas to a Power Automate. You have the trigger. So the trigger is essentially when something happens. So it could be related to a particular product. So in Power Automate, you have what we call connectors. And a connector is essentially what product or what technology that the Power Automate is connecting to. So whether it be SharePoint or Outlook or a third party like Salesforce, for example. And those connectors each have their own kind of actions, what they can do. So they have what we call triggers and actions. So a trigger for SharePoint might be when a file is created or when a file is deleted, for example, or a trigger inside of Salesforce might be when a new customer is added into the CRM database, for example. There's then actions which you can do. So with SharePoint, for example, it might be create a new folder, create a new file, share something with somebody, delete something, add a new item. Those are all kind of actions that it can then do. If it's a third party connector like Salesforce, it might be, say, for example, create a new contact record or send a sort of a notification or something along those lines. And essentially your workflows, I say, are started at the very beginning with a trigger and then they work their way through these different kind of actions as well as conditions. So you can say apply to each, or if this is equal to that, then do something. So you can branch off kind of logic. So if something was to happen, go down option A, whereas if something else was to happen, go down option B, and you can work out those kind of logics. So I've got a couple of examples here just to talk about as well. So I'm just going to jump back into here. So the first example, quite simplistic for what it actually sounds like, but I built a proof of concept for a AI email sentiment analysis. What I mean by that is when we receive an email into a mailbox, maybe it's an email from, maybe it's an email to our customer, like a support mailbox, or maybe it's our sales mailbox, or maybe it's just an IT support ticket, for example. And when that comes through the mailbox, we're going to take out the information and we're going to analyze it to see whether it's positive or negative. And actually, we can build this really simply with this workflow. We can see that the trigger is when a new email arrives inside of the outbox, we're going to take the HTML to text, so it's just the body text from this email. We're then going to pass it through this analyzed positive or negative sentiment and pass that into text. And then the final action is we're going to create an item. So in a SharePoint list, we're then passing in the information. So the title of the email, and then we've got things over here, which is like the probability of whether or not this is a negative statement. So probability of overall text is negative, probability that it's neutral, or probability that it's positive. So say, for example, an email comes through and goes, wow, Valto, great service, really love this, blah, 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 blah. Then the probability overall text positive is probably going to be high 90s, 98%, 99%, something like that. And this is really useful because we can then do things automatically based on that. So say, for example, if there was a really high positive scoring rating, we might want to then branch off and we could create an additional step to this workflow where we're sending an email to our marketing team to say, these guys are really happy. Maybe we want to build out a case study or something like that, contact them. Or if it was negative, maybe it goes to our customer success team and they're going to pick up the phone and speak to them and find out what the problem is and get that resolved for them as soon as possible. So that's just one example of something you can do with Power Automate. Another example is a customer feedback alert. So this might even feed into the previous one. So I've probably demonstrated this the wrong way around, to be honest. But this is a real world kind of example of something that we do. We use Microsoft Forms. So Microsoft Forms is a product of Microsoft 365 where you can build out your own forms, surveys, questionnaires, things like that. And you can use them internally, but you can also use them externally. So we've set up a customer feedback form, which at the end of every kind of project, we send out to our customers and ask them to fill out. Typically in about 10 questions, something like that, of so how do we do, rate us on this from 1 to 10, that sort of thing. Then what happens is we've got this Power Automate workflow that we want to notify people, and we also want to take a copy and put it in a public space. So we want to post the results of every customer feedback we have within inside of Microsoft Teams, so that all of our team members, all of our staff can be aware of the live feedback that we're getting in real time. So this workflow, essentially what it'll do is it'll be triggered when a new response is submitted into the customer service feedback form. It'll get the details and then it'll post it directly into the Microsoft team that we have. It'll have the kind of core details, who it's from, the email details, things like that. Also, there's a bit of a condition here that is if there was any problems. So as part of the form, there's a question which is called something like, was there any problems with your project? Something like that. And if that box is equal to yes, then we're going to issue a separate email. We're going to send a separate email to our project management team to let them know that there was an issue with the project, and it's probably worth following up to close that out. So again, it's another way that we can automate things based on information data that we're getting passed through to us, and we're using all the Microsoft 365 tools at this point. Then the final one is we also use Dynamics 365 as a Microsoft sort of software house. We use Dynamics 365 for our projects, so planning out our projects and putting our projects in here. So what we do is we also have a workflow which on project creation essentially is getting the kind of key information, the project name, the customer name, things like that, and then we post all of that information directly into our Microsoft Teams as well. So we're actually going to alert everybody in our Microsoft team to let them know a new project has been created and that's being allocated and it's going to be worked on shortly. That thread also then means that we've got a centralized point for conversations around that project as we're transitioning into getting it started. So if there's any questions on, okay, well, I've got a question on the specification, or have we got a purchase order for the project yet? Have we got this? Have we got that? We've got a centralized place that the operational people, the sales people, the financial people can all jump in and have a conversation in one place. And that's all driven from having a new record created inside of Dynamics 365, inside of the projects table, that has all the details of who the customer is, what the project details are. All of that is then posted to Teams to make it nice and easy for everyone to find that and collaborate together. So that was Power Automate. So just to recap, Power Automate is a workflow engine tool which is really simple, really easy to use. Again, it's low code, if not no code. A lot of Power Automate is just drag and drop. You don't really need to know formulas. You can get quite far with just using the sort of drag and drop functionality within inside of Power Automate. It's also worth knowing that Power Automate, it does work the workflows in the background of things which have interfaces like SharePoint or like PowerApps or things like that. But also you don't have to have something which has got an interface. Power Automate also has the options for building out what they call Power Automate push buttons, which is essentially you can install the Power Automate app on your mobile phone, and then you can have push buttons which appear on your phone. So those are perfect for short snippet little things, like if you wanted to quickly set a reminder, or if you wanted to use like a checking out sort of function. So we've helped build in the past before Power Automate push buttons, which say for example, if you've got people out and about in the field and they're going out. So we were working with an agency which was sending out nursing staff to people, and they had the apps on their phone where when they arrived at the service users property, they would click on a button, and all they had to do was click on check-in button. That would then take a log and put it into a SharePoint list to say that Joe Bloggs is logged in to this property. The GPS kind of services of Power Automate is really good. Actually, it's within about I think it's about 4 meter square radius, something like that. So you can get an exact location of where that person is. So if they were at home and press that button, it'd be very obvious because the GPS would show that they had logged in from home rather than from that service user's property. Then you've got the data there that they checked in. And then you can use Power Automate even more than that. So you could have something automated that if they don't check out within an expected period of time, say, for example, they typically are on site for 30 minutes. If it's, say, an hour past the checkout and they've not checked out, that could automate a push notification to their line manager to say it might be worth doing just a quick welfare check to make sure that they're okay. Because quite often these people are in vulnerable situations when they're going out to people's homes on their own. So that sort of thing is a safeguarding kind of issue, which could be easily mitigated using Power Automate. So I'm going to hand over now to my colleague, Danny, and he's going to talk to you about PowerApps pages, Power BI, and some other cool tricks. Thanks, Danny.
Thank you, Dougie. So yeah, my name is Danny Well. I'm one of the cloud consultants here at Valto. So I tend to deal with Power Platform and SharePoint consulting, but also data warehousing and Power BI. So Dougie's covered up on Canvas apps, model-driven apps, and Power Automate. I'm going to talk about Power App Pages, Power Virtual Agents, and Power BI. So firstly, I'm going to start with Power App Pages. So here you can see this allows organizations to quickly create secure, low-code business websites for their customers and partners to interact with. So it's like having your own website to share information, accept feedback, let people interact with your business in a secure, controlled way. So kind of think of Power App Pages like the digital front door for your business, but sometimes it doesn't necessarily need to be your full website for your business. This could branch into your website, and you can design it to look like your website as well. One of the big benefits of Power App Pages is the low code development. So you can easily drag and drop and build pages by adding in images, buttons, etc. But there's also the option to have pro code development, where you can add some more custom developments to do certain things of branding and components that might match your organization. So data lists and data capture forms, these are used so you can interact directly with your internal data. So for example, you have a form that Dougie has built on his model-driven app, and it's for customers, and you want to be able to share that externally. You can put that form that Dougie's already built into your website with a drag and drop functionality. So this is secure because you can set up authenticated methods for access, and you can also allow anonymous access as well, which you can just share public information. So potentially some pages are authenticated, some pages are anonymous. So this is designed when you are building the portal. So some example of some use cases that we've saw before, and myself have saw before, is customer self-service portals. So I've had an example with customers in the past where we've built fire inspection forms. So working with a local fire service, we wanted to capture all the details from that local area. So any hotel owners, public house owners, anything shops, etc., can fill in fire inspection forms and return that to the organisation. I saw it used for employee portals. So we work with a manufacturing company who has a client-facing dashboard, which can show reports and Power BI, so you can embed Power BI reports and analytics and share that with your clients. We saw it worked with multiple areas: event registration and management, case submission, knowledge management sites. There's lots of different scenarios and use cases that you can use this technology. I'll show you this Wales permit. So this is a proof of concept site that I've set up. This is to be able to apply for permits. And as you can see here, this is my lovely view from my garden in Wolverhampton. So scrolling down a little bit, you can display information that you want to explain using imagery, text to explain processes. So this is the permit process, so submission of data. After you've completed your permit application and your payment, you'll be able to submit it online and track its status on this site. You'll be able to review and confirm, and then view the decisions that are made. And then here you can see the permits that you're available to apply for. So you could think of this as, in your scenarios, this could be products, services that you provide. At the top of the site, you can see navigation. So you can design navigations. You can customize it by security to say admins can see certain types of links in here, see admin pages or reports, or you can have open users. So anonymous users can see everything about the company, but they can't actually submit anything until they sign in. So this sign in functionality here is pre-built within the system, and you can allow what types of authentication you'd like to do. So you can use single sign-on with Microsoft 365. You can use Facebook, you can use LinkedIn to connect into your sign-ins. You can also send something called embedded invitations. So you can kind of pre-create who's got access to create these web contacts, and then when you've got all the people that you want to have access, you can send them an email where they'll click a link and they'll be able to create their account. For this scenario, I'm just going to log in with my Azure AD account. And this will give you slightly more functionality now. So I'll be able to submit forms, view any personal forms. So the first page it takes me to is the profile page. So in here, I enter all my profile information. So I can enter who I work for, my title, my nickname, website. You can customize this as well slightly. And then this is all stored in your internal contacts table in Dataverse, in your web contact table. So I'll just go back to the home page. If I scroll down now, I can see the different types of submissions. So say, for example, I wanted to apply for a pool and a spa. I'll click the apply button, and then this will show me a form that I can capture. So you can auto fill it as well from previous web browser history. So I'll do that on this scenario. Press next, and then I can move through this form and capture data. So there's some applicant information and then project details about my request. I can upload files. So this will open my browser to be able to select something. I'll select this document. Next. And then in this scenario, we want to capture an acknowledgement section. So I acknowledge, I hereby understand, and then I can put my initials in here as well. And then this will all be captured internally in your databases in Dataverse. So I'll submit that application, and that's submitted successfully. And now I've got the option to view my recently submitted permits. So on here you can see this is what is called a list, and I can see all my permit entries and items in there. So there's an example of a PowerApp portal or PowerApp page. So in hindsight, it's a good way of getting your internal databases, so Dataverse, any forms that you've designed internally for your model-driven apps, like Dougie mentioned, and you have some external information that you want to capture from your clients or partners. It's a good way of setting up a secure method to capture external data. Okay. Next, I'm going to talk about Power Virtual Agents. So big topic at the moment. OpenAI, ChatGPT. There's a lot of discussion in the tech industry around artificial intelligence and chatbots. So why not have a go at making your own? So what Power Virtual Agents is, it allows you to create conversational chatbots without needing to have any prior coding experience. So with chatbots basically are like virtual assistants that can answer questions, perform tasks through a chat interface. For example, if you go onto an e-commerce website, you'll scroll through, you'll be shopping, a chat pop-up box will pop up, and it will ask questions like, are you happy today? Have you found what you're looking for? And you can kind of talk to your customers. So with Power Virtual Agents, you can automate common customer service tasks, provide instant answers to frequently asked questions, and engage with customers in a natural conversational dialogue. So for some examples and use cases for virtual agents of sorts, the one I just previously mentioned, a customer service agent. So it can be used to capture customer service tasks, such as answering the questions and providing information about your products and your services. We've built stuff for clients around lead generation. So these chatbots can be used to engage with potential customers, gather information about their needs, interests, and then it makes it easier to identify whether to qualify or disqualify leads. There's employee assistance. So with Power Virtual Agents, you can also use this internally. So for example, you could build a HR or an IT chatbot that answers employees' questions, maybe around policies or procedures. If it was IT, maybe around the technologies that they use. And you could build like knowledge-based articles and link those and integrate those together. And yeah, lots more examples, marketing, sales, you can help with marketing campaigns, sales can connect to your Dynamics 365 sales data, etc. So, and it's very straightforward to build these bots. As I said before, there's no need for prior coding experience. You can create a bot, and then using the visual flow builder, which you can see on the screen at the moment in the tablet, you can start to define the questions for your chatbot and the answers that will provide a structured way through to a response. So the next step will be to train the bot. So you can train it, provide it example conversations, adjusting its natural languages and stuff like that. And then when you want to publish and test this bot, you can put it into a public site and an area where you can get some champions or some end users to test it, ask the questions that they would usually ask, and even more, go back, make those changes, train it even more. And it can integrate with other applications such as Microsoft Teams, Dynamics 365, PowerApps. You can put these into your portals, your pages, your Canvas apps. Lots of different ways you can integrate with Power Virtual Agents. And then also, finally, is the monitoring and improvement element to Power Virtual Agents. So you can monitor the performance of the chatbot. You can have analytics and reporting features to help you track the different effectiveness of the chatbot. So potentially it could identify areas that need improvement. Potentially you need to add, it will say it's a little bit red around your products. You might be worth adding a few more questions because we've had less success rates on the certain products. So you can easily tailor these and change these questions to fix those common problems. Next, I will talk around Power BI. So Power BI is the Power Platform's business intelligence and data visualization tool. So as Dougie was explaining earlier, what this means is it will help you make sense of large amounts of data. So imagine you have a big spreadsheet, lots of information, you want to understand what it all means. Power BI, you can use that to turn that into easy to understand charts, graphs, and other visuals. I can show you examples of maps and lots of other different types of visualizations that Power BI supports. So just think of Power BI as like a picture book for your data. Instead of reading through rows and rows of numbers, you can see data in a way that makes it easy to understand. For example, if you're looking for a long list of sales numbers, you could see a graph that could show you how your sales have changed over time. It brings lots of benefits. So you can connect to a various amount of data sources, Excel, Dataverse, SharePoint, SQL, external sources, APIs, live RSS feeds. There's the endless opportunities you can connect to in terms of data sources, and you can really enable that data driven decision making in your organization. So this will increase productivity, efficiency. If you build reports, say, for where you get frequently asked questions or frequently asked information, you can create reports that people, instead of sending messages, emails, can look at reports to get those answers quicker. So it also supports collaboration and report sharing, so you can share these with consumers internally, you can share them with clients, you can share them externally with partners, etc. There's different components to Power BI. So I'll quickly run through the components involved. So there's Power BI Desktop, which is the Windows-based application for data modeling and report building. So this is the tool that you use to build your reports, to build your dashboards, to build your visualizations. You have Power BI Report Server. So what the report server is, this is the server-based on-premise version of reporting. And then there is Power BI Service, and the Power BI Service is the cloud-based solution for report sharing and collaboration. There is, apologies, there is Power BI mobile apps, so you can access and interact with reports and dashboards on the go. And then also the fifth component will be Power BI API and Power BI Embedded. So these solutions are for embedding Power BI reports within other applications. So for example, if you had an external facing website or you wanted to embed your Power BI report into a model-driven app or into a PowerApps Pages website, you can do so with this functionality. I've got an example I was going to show you on Power BI, if that's okay. So there we go. So here you can see is a Power BI app, and I have a few reports down the left-hand side and tabs. This first one is around leads. So in here I can see multiple visualizations. I can see slicers, so I can go into here and change the amount of months, for example. So I could change that to I want to see information from the last 3 months, and when I click into that, it will change my data and visuals. And here you can see different types of slicers. So potentially I want to see all emails that have come through in the last 2 months, and then I can then visualize this. So we've had 173 leads come through via emails, potential values, amount that have been disqualified. I can see them by their assigned tech, by their assigned owner. I can see what reasons why they've been disqualified. So here you can see 73% of the leads were non-sales. And then here you can see open leads by interest. We can go through different tabs and see through time. So open leads by interest, I can see that Microsoft 365 is one of our lead interests, highest in the chart, and we can see SharePoint tokens, that kind of thing. So I'll just show you another report. So On this report, we are talking around timesheets. So same again, it's got a similar look and feel, the tabs across the top, the slices across the top. So you can see here, I can select a certain date. I can select a department. So say, for example, I just wanted to see the consultancy team's timesheets or the management teams, etc. And then I can see on the right whether who's submitted and who hasn't, and then I can go into this view as well and see it over time. That doesn't look too good at the moment, but this is just for demo purposes. But I can assure you, people are putting their timesheets in. And then one more I'd like to show you on Power BI is this response dashboard. So this is using a map visualization. So on this map visualization, you can hover over a certain element and it will give you a tooltip. So here you can see that there's currently an incident happening on this long and latitude location. So we can put postcodes and stuff in there, but for this purpose, we had long and lats for the vehicles, machines that were going out to these incidents. So here you can see like the number of vehicles that would attend these types of incidents as well. So you can see some visuals on the right here. So total amount of incidents in progress, some SLA statuses and KPIs. You can see this is actually vehicles for a fire service. So the amount of vehicles that are available and on site and on incidents. Now this visual here is quite cool because we are not looking after this data at all. This is connecting to the Met Office API feeds, so we can constantly get live data without having to store it internally around, in this scenario, the weather. And then this was for a local fire service. So in this scenario, it was the Met Office for to get the weather, so they could be going to an incident and they need to know whether there's going to be icy roads or certain conditions that might affect times to the incident. But what else we did on this application was stuff like we connected to MI5 to get the latest threat levels, so we could get notifications. We connected to National Rail, so we could find about any incidents on trains, any disruptions at services, stations and stuff like that. So we didn't have to rely on storing internal data. We could capture that from external sources. And then when you select that, similar to the other visuals, everything will slice it down dependent on that. And then I can go and look at this incident and then click into it. And then that could potentially open one of Dougie's Canvas or model-driven apps or an internal system where that's dealt with. So just to conclude, Power BI it's a comprehensive solution for data analysis, visualization, reporting will help your organizations to make informed decisions and real data-driven decisions. That's my bit, so I will hand back over to yourself, Doug.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Danny. It was really interesting. Can we go to the next slide, please? Brilliant. So we've got some time now just for some Q&A. So there are some questions that have been popped into the Q&A. I'll just go through in a second. But if you do have any questions, feel free to drop them into the Q&A function now. So just taking a little look at these. So first one, what is the difference between a Canvas Power App and a model-driven Power App? So great question. It can be quite difficult at times when you're first getting started with Power Platform to know the difference between these different things. To give you a high level, the Canvas apps, I say, is something that you build completely from scratch, from blank, and it means that you've got the ability to create anything you like within reason, and you can design it in any way, shape or form you want. However, the downside of that, because you're literally building everything almost from scratch, even though it's not using kind of pro code, it's using low code, almost like Excel-based formulas, it's still got the chance that you're going to have bugs and errors and issues and that sort of stuff. Whereas model-driven apps, it is something that is kind of semi-pre-built. You've just got to build out the kind of the tables, the fields and things like that, but the actual user interface is built for you. And with model-driven apps, you've got a lot less chance that there's going to be kind of bugs in that because the user interface is completely built for you. Another question here, the Power BI kind of question here, Danny, so probably best one for you. So it is, can you use multiple Excel files as the database? Sorry, can you use multiple Excel files as the data source from Power BI?
Thank you, Dougie. The answer is yes, depending on the situation. So Excel files are very good user interfaces for clients, and you'll see a lot of organizations use Excel, and there's a lot of potentially teams that have hundreds of Excel files. So sometimes there's an actual sprawl, but I wouldn't recommend for business critical reports using Excel, but definitely for personalized reports, productivity reports, potentially if it's just maybe up to 100, 200 users that you could potentially share a report with Excel as a data source, correct. But you have to just remember that the data and reports is driven from the data source. So if you make a mistake or if there's invalid data in that Excel file, it will display up into that report. So just make sure that that data is secure and there's some validation. But there is no problem with using Excel as a data source.
Great. Looks like a couple more questions coming in as well. So one here for you as well, Danny. On the response dashboard, how often is the live data refreshed? Could it provide live tracking on mobilization vehicles?
Yes and no. So we can. You'd have to go into a more premium licensing. So in a future session, I can share some details around Power BI licensing. So you can, with the Pro version of Power BI, you can use up to 8 refreshes a day, and then there's a premium version which you can use up to, I think it is 48 refreshes a day, so that's every 30 minutes. But then you can also use direct queries. So it's a very good question. It's hard to answer on this call, but you can use a direct query. So that direct query is just, as it sounds, is live data, but you are quite limited to what you can do in terms of manipulation of the data. If you need to make any changes or build any calculations, yeah, you come across a few issues. So really, the answer in hindsight is yes, you can do live reporting, but it's whether you need to do live reporting or whether it be an action. For example, say something happens, an incident's plugged in, and then that refreshes the data source, or if you 100% need it live, then you look to use that direct query. But I'll look to get a link and share that in the question.
Perfect.
Thank you, Doug.
Just whilst you're looking for that, another question, are PowerApps responsive? So this is a really good question and comes up all the time. And the short answer is it depends on which Power App you're talking about. With Canvas Power Apps, they're not natively kind of responsive in the sense that when you build them, you have to kind of factor in them being responsive. So you can build them being responsive, but it tends to almost double up the time it takes to actually build them because you have to build them in a very specific way to make them responsive. However, with model-driven apps, it's native, it's just part of it. Again, because you're not building out the user interface, it's already built for you. It's already got that kind of responsiveness built into it. So it's actually really easy to use on a mobile phone, on a tablet, something like that, and you can transition from using multiple different devices as well. I think we've got time just for one last question here. Another one for you, Danny, I think. From Amy, really interesting to see the mapping integration. Could you complete route optimization? For example, the healthcare worker has multiple visits to make and we need them to get around efficiently.
Yes, you could do that. That could be a mixture of multiple of the services that we've talked about today. So I know before in a similar situation, I've worked with model-driven apps where we've had a stage-gated approach. So this was for safe and well visits. So people would identify who needs to have these safe and well visits, and then once they've been qualified, they'll move to the next stage, and then a person will go with their device to that location and check in when they get to that location. So you can see that the person's checked into that location. And then they would fill out a form on the tablet while they're with their client or with that partner, and then it will take the details, and then they would input that back into the model-driven app, and then you could go back once that's been finished. That would go to the final stage, which in your example you could have a Power BI report that's explained the routes that have been done on this day and the certain elements and the certain places that have been visited. So with those visualizations earlier, you could imagine how you could start to build up to say, I'd like to see all the visits that have happened in Manchester today, or in a more closer region.
Perfect. Thanks, Danny. Brilliant. So that's all the questions we've got for now. I just want to sort of get the 5-minute warning on the meeting now. But yeah, thank you very much for attending. And can we go to the final slide, please?
Yes, of course.
So, in fact, I think it's the second to last slide, so I've really got to power through this now. It's worth just kind of mentioning that we do have service offerings around Power Platform. So we offer a PowerApps workshop, which is essentially where we can deliver workshops on all of today's topics to talk about PowerApps, Power Automate, Power BI. The agenda for these types of workshops is typically that we do a demonstration of some products and show you what we can kind of do. We show you how to structure your data, and we interview the key stakeholders to understand what the solution would look like. We typically create a bit of a wireframe, and as part of that, we give you the workshop report, which has a fixed price for delivering your Power Platform solution. We also offer other workshops as well. So we offer support and guidance around deploying Microsoft Teams, SharePoint intranets, modern workplace, Power Platform strategies, Power BI, you name it, anything Microsoft 365, you can speak to us as well. Can we just go to the next slide? Also, just to sort of promote, our next event is happening on Monday, the 27th of February at 2 till 3 p.m. All about what new features in Microsoft 365 there are available for non-profits. So that'll be a really good one. If you're working in a non-profit and you want to know how to get the most out of Microsoft 365, please join and find out. So from everyone at Valto, we just want to say a big thank you for joining and keep a lookout for our future events. Thank you very much.